All right, Duke fans, 3 times in 1 week, back to back to back. Here we are on the DBR podcast, episode 249 coming at you. Once again, we are previewing Dukie's headed to the NBA, and it is time for Tre Jones. We are going to be previewing Tre's potential NBA draft future. And once again, I am here with my friends Donald and Sam. Guys, are y'all excited? Sam, are you ready for us to talk about Tre Jones and the NBA draft?
I am absolutely ready to talk about Tre Jones in the NBA draft. I think all of us are big Tre Jones fans, and we're very excited to see his career develop in the NBA. He recently received that Hall of Honor award at Duke, so his picture is in the Hall of Honor and will be there, until there are too many guys that don't fit anymore. So Tre Jones is a cherished member of the Duke family, and we're very excited to kick off this conversation with Jeremiah about the third Duke prospect in the draft this year, Tre Jones.
And for me, I'm just sad, at the sense I'm really excited to talk about Tre Jones, but we've gone back to back and now we're going back to back to back. I feel like we should have had a fourth guy that was eligible for this draft so we can do some Washington Nationals magic and go back to back to back to back. But alas, the Washington Nationals are going to keep that record. We can only go 3 in a row. But Tre Jones, I think the best that we're saving is for last. So let's go.
Yeah. So with that, we're going to go to our conversation. Sam led the conversation with Jeremiah Boswell. And by the way, if you haven't listened to the previous 2 episodes, the one about Cassius Stanley yesterday, the one 2 days ago, featuring our conversation about Vernon Carey. We're once again talking to Jeremiah Boswell. He's one of the founding partners of the Skill Factory, which is a basketball training academy. He's employed by the NBA in youth development. Go back and listen to those other episodes to hear all the players, the NBA players that he has worked with. This is someone who knows what it takes to get drafted, what teams are looking for in the NBA draft. And here is Sam's conversation with Jeremiah about the NBA draft future of Tre Jones.
All right, Jeremiah, thanks for being with us. I want to do our last conversation here about the draft as we head into it to talk about Tre Jones, who has been Duke's point guard for the last 2 years. He's been a team leader, both emotionally and making big shots at the end of games. We remember, his amazing performance in Chapel Hill this year, I think is going to stand out for Duke fans for a long time. And I want to start the conversation about him talking about his return for his sophomore season. After his freshman year, his jump shot was not great. And I think that the big conversation with him coming back for sophomore year was if he can improve his jump shot, he's going to be a much more viable NBA pick. How do you feel he's progressed from his freshman year to his sophomore year?
I think he made great strides. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, just even looking at his percentages, they went up, right? But he also seemed to play with it a little more confidence and shoot the ball with a little more confidence. I think coming into the season, he knew he was going to have to be more of an offensive presence, and that kind of he lived up to it, right? Like he owned it and took it on, and you could see it. So I think that was a help for him. So I think that's a big positive. He made shots. He showed that he can extend his range and become more confident, more comfortable. So that was big for him.
I also mentioned at the top there that, a thing that Duke fans are going to remember about Tre Jones is his leadership, and that he just seems to have that it factor. How much do teams care about that in the draft, and how do you measure a thing like that? Like where does it come into the evaluation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a million things in evaluations, but I think the way people fit. One team told me a few years ago that, when we're looking at players, we only want people who we want to be around for 82 games. We're traveling with these guys everywhere. We're in the same hotels. We're going, you want to be around people that you like. And so I think he has just kind of that good nature about him that will always be there. I think they also have kind of the proof in the pudding by looking at his older brother and seeing kind of how he's doing as a success story. So I think he's got a lot of those just positive attributes as a person that are going to allow him to be kind of a stable NBA player.
And I'm glad you brought up Tyus, because I was going to go there next. I don't think that Tyus Jones is a great comp for Tre Jones. It just feels like their games, at least in college, were pretty different. Tyus was much more of the big shot maker, and Tre, I think, was a little bit more of a facilitator than he was. Do you think that it's appropriate for teams to be looking at Tyus as a blueprint for Tre, or are there other players that you think are better comps for Tre Jones as a professional?
Yeah, I think it's fair because I think you look at both of them as a backup point guard that you want to be stable and consistent, and you're not worried about, the ups and downs. Is he going to have 8 turnovers this game, or is he going to shoot, 4 bad shots off the dribble? You don't have to worry about that really with either of them, right? Like there's just a confidence in a coach that can say, with these guys, I get this, I know what I'm getting. And so I think they both have that. And that's something even like a Frank Jackson, right? Like those guys have that, and coaches, they need it. They need something they can trust. And so I think those two definitely have that. And it helps him to be compared to his brother in that sense.
Another of Tre's best qualities, I think, that Duke fans got to see was his ability to play defense both on the ball and off the ball. He's not the biggest player, and certainly relative to some of the really big point guards that are coming into the NBA these days, he's not going to be as tall or as long as them. How well is his defense expected to translate? And are there things that you think he should be working on really on the defensive end to make himself more viable?
I think he's going to be a really good defender. Honestly, I think he just one with defense, you can't teach kind of effort and care and intensity and like never giving up on plays. Those are kind of intangibles that he has, but he also has really good technique. So if you're in a ice down blue, whatever you call it, situation on a pick and roll, he does a really good job of changing his angle of his body, getting into the body of the defender, and having active hands at the same time. And so he gets hit by a screen maybe, and he doesn't give up on it, right? So I think he has the potential to do that at the next level. The size thing to me doesn't worry me too much. Like he'll put on probably a little bit of strength and mass to help him. But there's not a whole lot of times where guards are kind of getting in the paint and playing bully ball that he's going to have to worry about. So I don't think that's going to be a big issue for him. Obviously, getting a little stronger will help, but I think he's going to be just fine as a defender.
Are there certain systems that you think fit his game the best in the NBA? It feels like the team, especially his sophomore year, but even his freshman year, was really tailored around his skills. That said, his first year, he was playing with Zion Williamson and RJ Barrett. They were the focal point. This last year, it was him and Vernon Carey. Much different playing styles, but both kind of worked for him. Is there a particular playing style that you think is particularly good or not so advantageous for him?
I think strong organizations that run good stuff are ideal, right? So I think about like the Spurs, obviously, the Bucks, even like a good coach who knows what they want, run good stuff, and can let him excel where he needs to excel, but also not ask too much of him. I think I'm trying to think of bad situations. There's probably only a handful of those, but he'd probably be fine in those as well, just because his kind of even keel nature. But I think systems that run good stuff with good, solid, firm coaches, where the other players also respect that coach, are going to help him because the coach is going to respect him, right? And so if he's in a place where the players are kind of, I look at like the Bulls last year, right, with Zach LaVine and the Boylan, issues, right? Zach LaVine wasn't really caring too much about what coach was saying and was going on the floor, and coming out of a timeout, coach might have said do this, and he was doing something else, right? And kind of had his own way. And so I think Tre wouldn't do well in that situation. He needs guys who are going to respect him because the coach respects him. And so I think there's a handful of good examples there.
I want to wrap up our set of conversations with you with a couple of general questions about Duke and players in the NBA. The first is, we've talked about Tre Jones, Cassius Stanley, and Vernon Carey. Of those three, if you had to pick, which of them do you think has kind of the longest, most successful NBA career, just based on the way the game is now?
Those are two different questions. Longest, Tre, most successful, potentially Cassius. I think those two. I mean, Tre could stick around for a long time just because all the reasons we mentioned. I think Cassius could turn a corner and become really good. Vernon, just as a big, you never know. Sometimes they pan out, sometimes they don't. I think he could make a lot of money overseas in China. He'd be a really, really good big in the Euro League. So not to say that would happen in these next, handful of years, but maybe it's by the third contract or something, he's moved on. So that's I guess my quick answer.
And then finally, I want to ask you kind of generally about Duke as it's perceived in the NBA. You mentioned previously to us about Cassius Stanley, how he's going to interview well because he's a Duke guy, and everyone knows that the Duke guys are going to interview well. What other qualities do you think permeate through the Duke program for all the guys that they're sending to the NBA? And do you think you've told us that you've been working with potential draft picks for a long time? Has that changed at all as Duke has embraced more of this one and done setup where they have guys only staying 1 or 2 years as opposed to 3 or 4?
I don't think so. Like, I think you always get guys who, I think everybody that goes to Duke, whether they wrestle with it or not, they all end up accepting that they're a part of a team. The team is bigger than the individual. There's like a culture of family and commitment, and just kind of like a work ethic. Like, I think there are some things that you're always going to get from Duke, regardless of a one and done situation. So yeah, I think those elements are always there. I think when I look at guys from Duke, like some of them pan out a little bit better than they are, but often you can kind of predict where they're going. When I think about maybe an enemy of yours, Kentucky, right? There's a lot of guys who don't do so well there, and then they become really good NBA players. That's happened for a number of them, right? Like, and so in some ways, what's happening there is their earnings are being hurt by going to Kentucky because they come out of there. Tyler Hero isn't drafted, or Eric Bledsoe, or you can name a long list of guys who are drafted lower but have more success. So they lost $8 million in their first contract, and I feel like Duke guys don't necessarily have that issue because you're kind of able to see what they showcase some of the skills they're able to use at the next level. So I don't know how I got there, but maybe you guys like that jab in there as well. But no, there's just certain qualities that all Duke guys have.
No, it's great. On a recent episode of this program, we had a listener email us asking for ways to make fun of Kentucky because she's a Duke fan and she's about to get married to a Kentucky guy. So yeah, keep them coming. We love that kind of stuff. That's easy for us. But anyway, all that being said, Jeremiah Boswell, thank you so much for being on the Duke Basketball Report program with us. We really appreciate you being able to share all this insight about Duke's incoming draftees and the whole process for getting them there. So thank you.
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you guys for having me.
Sam, you had the conversation with Jeremiah, so I'll go to you first. What's your big takeaway from what he had to say about Tre's NBA prospects?
I'm actually surprised at how forward he was about comparing Tre to Tyus, because I think of that as one of the kind of cheap comparisons, given that they are brothers. But as I noted in the conversation, I don't think they have very similar games, but that actually might work in Tre's favor when it comes specifically to his draft prospects, because I think Tyus Jones has worked out well as a middle of the first round type of player. So if NBA teams are looking at Tre Jones and saying he's got all the makeup and the skills that Tyus has, and has even arguably been individually more successful, not on a team basis because he didn't win a championship the way Tyus did, but was really the heart and soul of a Duke team in his sophomore season, I think that plays really well for Tre. I think that Jeremiah was also, to me, surprisingly bullish on Trey's sort of projection in the NBA, that he's going to be a good defender. He's going to figure a lot of things out, and that might come from working with him or working with other guys who have worked with him and knowing just how locked in he is on the court. And then finally, I thought it was really telling about how different types of players react to different NBA situations, and how, you know, the player and the organization sort of have to match. That seems really important for Tre Jones, and so I'm very excited to see where he lands, because I really hope that it's the kind of good fit situation that's going to set him up for success.
Yeah, and I think when we're looking at Tre Jones, he did everything that anyone asked of him, right? Like, he came in, he was a hailed freshman point guard. He did well for the 2018-2019 team. He decided to come back to school because he wanted to, go for a national championship. That obviously the coronavirus kind of robbed him of that opportunity late in the season. But he also improved in all areas. He improved his passing. He improved his defense. He improved his shooting. He improved everything. And really, when you're looking, if you're an NBA scout, you got to be like, yo, this guy came back to school and did exactly what we want for guys when they go back to school, to improve in all areas of their game. And that really, and that plus the comparisons to Tyus, and just how Tyus has really just emerged as kind of, that backup point guard that you desperately need, that can be solid no matter what in all areas of the game for so long. If Tre is better than that, then NBA GMs have got to be just salivating at the opportunity to kind of grab this guy and say, yo, we need, there is always a need for backup point guards that can be solid and that can contribute, or even guys that can take over and start in a pinch for, some of the stars of this league. You have to have one of those guys. And I think Tre Jones is one of the best suited point guards in this draft to do that.
You guys stole my thunder. I literally had written down two things I wanted to talk about. The first one was, I thought it was so interesting when Jeremiah talked about Tre going to a team that has the right culture, that has a strong coach, that he could be a reflection of the coach, that his teammates would see him in that fashion and that would allow him to succeed. And that as a result of that, going later in the first round, where you tend to have more stable organizations, was probably a good thing for Tre. So that was one thing I wrote down. Sam talks about it. Then the other thing I wrote down for myself, I was like, oh, you know what? We have to talk about the fact that Tre improved so much in the places he needed to improve from his freshman to his sophomore year. Everyone said he needed to be more assertive on offense. He needed to be more of a scorer. He needs to work on his outside shot. Lo and behold, he's more assertive on offense. He's a better outside shooter. He's more of a scorer in his sophomore season. And a guy who does that, a guy who you say, hey, you need to work on this, he works on it and succeeds at it. Boy, if I'm an NBA GM, that's what I'm looking for. And here's Donald saying the exact same thing. I got nothing else to add, gentlemen. I'm flummoxed at this point. So we're going to get to
it means we're really smart. Like we all did not talk about what we were going to talk about, and sure enough, in our minds, it incepted that we were going to talk about the same things.
Yeah, it takes a lot to get those jobs, I think. But so we're going to play our game. We said 25th pick. All three of us said we're taking Vernon Carey. 26th pick, we all said, I'm probably going to wait till the second round on Cassius Stanley. We are now NBA GMs again. We have the 27th pick. Should I even do this? I think I know where all three of us stand. I'm going to say where I stand first rather than go to you guys. If I have the 27th pick and Tre Jones is on the board, I am laughing at the teams that passed on him, and I'm taking him in a heartbeat. Backup point guards are a really valuable thing in the NBA. I'm not saying Tre Jones is going to be a guy who plays 30 minutes a game, but you need a guy to play 12 to 15 minutes a game and be really solid on defense and knock down an occasional shot and facilitate for the other guys on your team. And occasionally, when your point guard gets hurt or something, they can step up and play 30. And I think Tre Jones has that written all over him. And just like his brother, he'll have a long career and make a lot of money as a backup NBA point guard. And if you can get one of those in the mid-20s, I would do it in a heartbeat. Donald, how about you?
So here's the thing. If I have the 27th pick and I'm the Detroit Pistons, I'm making a phone call. I'm making a phone call to the Miami Heat, who I believe have the 21st pick. I also think that would be a really great spot for Tre Jones. I think the Miami Heat may not let him get past 21. So what I'm doing is I'm calling and I'm saying, yo, can I move up to 21? Because I really want this kid, Tre Jones, and hoping that I can con them into taking a second round pick in exchange so that I can have the steal of the draft of the first round, of the late first round rather, and get Tre Jones at 21. So yeah, I'm getting him at 27. I'm like you, Jason. I'm laughing if he's already at 27, but I honestly don't think he's going to make it there. I think 21 is that sweet spot for him, right where the Miami Heat pick, because I think they could use him, and I think he would fit in well with them. And if I'm the Detroit Pistons or another team, I'm making a call to them to say, hey, what it'll take to get you out of that spot.
Yeah, if I'm any kind of playoff team, then Tre Jones almost certainly fits a need for me, because it's that sort of steady backup point guard, quality to his game that every team needs more guys like that. Guys that are plugged into the system. I think Donald hit the nail on the head with like the Miami Heat being a great example. Tons of teams out there that I think could use Tre Jones. I think he gets a first round look because one of those successful playoff teams is going to say that we need a guy like him to get us over the top.
Guys, I will say the one thing, I mean, we're really bullish on Tre, obviously. The one thing I'll say is that this is a NBA draft that is pretty rich in point guards. I think it's pretty likely that Tre will be no better than maybe the 7th or 8th point guard taken in this NBA draft. And as a result, it may be that despite us feeling like he'd be a steal at, in the mid 20s, that he lasts the second round. I don't want folks to be fooled into thinking, he's a sure thing to go in the first round. I think he is probably not a sure thing to go in the first round. Not at all.
The key here is upside. It's a big word that's always in the NBA draft, upside. And then there's also the word solid. And really it's about what a GM or team prefers. Do they want the guy with the upside, or do they want the solid pick? I think when it comes to the later end of the draft, you're talking about teams who are well established. They're 1 or 2 pieces away from an NBA championship. And I think when it comes to those teams, they're looking for someone more solid. But yeah, at the top of the draft, there's going to be a lot of point guards taken because the upside is there on quite a few guys.
Hey guys, there was one other cool thing we did with Jeremiah that I just want to get to very, very quickly. As he mentioned on the Vernon Carey episode that we recorded, he has worked with several players connected with Duke in the past. And I had to ask him about Jaymen Brakefield because he mentioned that he worked with Jaymen. So here is just a little bit of a conversation. I know, we're mostly talking about Dukies in the NBA draft right now, but the chance to hear from someone who's worked with Jaymen Brakefield about what Jaymen may be like at Duke, I think is really important and really, going to be useful for us to understand one of the freshmen that we probably heard the least about Jaymen Brakefield of anybody on the current roster. So here's Jeremiah Boswell talking to us very quickly about his time working with Jaymen Brakefield. So Jeremiah, you mentioned to us that you've worked with Jaymen Brakefield. We haven't had a blue-white game. We haven't had a lot of chances to see the incoming Duke freshmen to see what they're like. You clearly know his game. Give us a quick scouting report, if you can, on Jaymen and what Duke fans should expect from him.
Yeah, Jaymen's a great kid, first and foremost. I spent some time with him. It's been several years ago he first came to Atlanta just because somebody that was in his circle trusted kind of what we do on court, and he came out and spent some time. Hard worker, very coachable, good kid, grounded. And then he actually came back and we spent some time with him this probably about a year ago. And I think, the thing about Jaymen and Duke is I think is a really good fit for both because he's a good player, but he's going to do really well in a system, in a culture where he doesn't have to be the guy necessarily. Like he's not creating every shot or trying to do too much. He's going to be able to show his strengths by spacing the floor, knocking down shots, playing off 1 or 2 dribbles at the rim, and that's where he's good. That's the situation he's good in, and that's what Duke's going to allow him to do. So I think you'll be able to see him make some open shots and be a good team player and play the right way.
Is he the kind of guy that you think will be an immediate impact player in college, or someone who, maybe take a couple years? Look, obviously at Duke, you're doing nothing but playing with guys who are future lottery picks, it feels like. So
right. Yeah. He's seasoned enough and good enough to be ready to play. I'll say that, and kind of where it goes from there is unknown, right? Like he could he could be great. It could be Marquise Bolden, right? And kind of want a little more, and frustrating on both ends. So I don't know. I think he's got a world of potential as a stretch shooter, but it's just hard to tell. What happens when you get into the day to day with him.
Perfect. That was great. Excellent. So that was some insight into Jaymen's game. Admittedly, Jeremiah said, he didn't work with him like in the past year or so. It was a little bit earlier in Jaymen's high school career. But I think some good insight into the type of player he's going to be. He seems very high on Jaymen as an outside shooter, as a stretch four, which is a big deal and something that Duke likes to employ. I think it'll be, it's going to be tough to get a lot of stretch four minutes with Matthew Hurt on the floor at Duke, but I suspect Jaymen Brakefield is not going to be a one and done kind of player for the Blue Devils.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's also intriguing, right? We kind of almost stumbled into this, the fact that your friend here happened to train a couple years ago one of the star recruits for this year's basketball team. So that's a great pull from you and also from Jeremiah, just to kind of give that insight that we wouldn't get anywhere else. And you're right. I think when it comes to the stretch four position, if you will, those minutes are really the bulk of them are going to go to Matthew Hurt. I say that, no pun intended, because I know he's bulked up a bit. But I do think with Jaymen Brakefield, he has a chance to really work out a role where if he can come off this bench, give us 10, 15 minutes of solid play, that's going to be helpful, because again, we're going to have a deep team, at least for the first part of the season. I know we like to talk about when we regress to the mean of a 7 to 8 man depth chart, but I think at least for the first couple months of the season, we're going to see a lot of all these guys, and that includes Jaymen Brakefield. And what we are seeing from some of these highlight videos with regards to all the players, and really even a small part with Jaymen Brakefield, confidence. Keep building the confidence that, hey, when I call your number, that you're ready to step out on the floor and produce. And I don't see why Jaymen Brakefield can't be one of those guys, especially in the early part of the season.
Yeah, I agree with Donald that the key here is that Jaymen Brakefield, given how little we're talking about him early in the season, is unlikely to get significant minutes for Duke this season. He'll be around for 2, 3, 4 years on the bench for the Blue Devils. And so it's more about the long-term development for him. I think it's cool that he's had opportunities to work with big-time trainers like this, and look forward to seeing anything really that he produces in a Duke uniform this year, but more so for him looking down the road for his contributions, perhaps as a sophomore.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate about him. Probably, we're not going to see a ton of him this season. But the Duke coaches, I'm sure, will tell Jaymen what he needs to do to improve. And there are many, many stories of guys who, weren't huge contributors as freshmen who turn into really, significant players for Duke down the road. And I suspect that's probably the path that Jaymen Brakefield is going to take. Kid's a great athlete, that's for sure. And hearing that he has a good outside shot, Coach K loves guys who can shoot. So I'm sure he'll find time at some point. Yeah, so that's going to do it for us here on episode 249. Folks, we hope you enjoyed this back-to-back-to-back trio of episodes on the Dukies headed to the NBA draft. We wish all three of them, Vernon Carey, Tre Jones, and Cassius Stanley, so much success. I'm sure those guys are going to do great in their basketball careers. God, I wish they were coming back to Duke, but as happens every year, the players we love the most seem to leave us the quickest. But for Donald and Sam, I am Jason. Thanks again to Jeremiah Boswell of the Skill Factory and NBA Youth Development for chatting with us about these players and giving us some insight into the NBA draft and how everything in the league works. We'll be back very, very soon to also talk about the latest Duke news, all the things going on with the team as we get closer and closer to the start of the college basketball season. A lot of interesting things happening. But for now, we are done with our NBA draft previews. By the way, we want to hear from all of you. If you think we are just absolutely crazy that Jeremiah has no idea what he's talking about, you're wrong. But if you think that, write to us. Talk to us. dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a review. As I've promised in the past, you leave us a 5-star review. We will read it on the air. Send us emails. We'll answer your questions out over here. We want to interact with all of you out there. But until next time, like I said, I'm Jason. He's Sam. He's Donald. And this is the Duke Band. Take us home.
Thank you guys. Hopefully it was helpful. I don't know if I shared anything.
No, definitely.
But
It's
Yeah.
It's cool to get people who like are in it but are not like, you are not like a famous person. But you bring bring good analysis. So it's like sometimes we get to interview like prominent people, but like you can go anywhere to hear audio of like Duke coaches and stuff. Like the in the weeds stuff, I think actually plays really well. So this is, I personally, I don't know how the others feel. Obviously, Jason invited you.
No, I agree.
Yeah, but this is the kind of stuff that like it is just harder. It is like harder content to find. So
cool. Well, yeah,
you kind of gave the wrong cut. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many people who will give the canned answer, like, "Oh yeah, I love Cassius Stanley. He's a great dunker." And you're like, "Yo, he needs to work on his handle a little bit." And like, those things are the things that we need to hear, and our fans need to hear, so that, you know, when draft night comes, we have we like to walk in with realistic expectations of where our guys are going to go if they're going to get drafted, and that's what we needed. So like, not gassing these guys up, saying this is what they're great at, this is what they're not great at, but more importantly, this is what NBA scouts are looking at.
Yeah, and who's making the decision, right? Like, is the owner weighing in? Is the coach? Do they have? I heard a story just the other day about gosh, I forgot the coach at SMU, Larry Brown. There was a draft night.
Hang on. Did you just forget who Larry Brown was and introduce him simply as the coach at SMU? That's amazing. That is awesome. I'm so happy we did that.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. But so the GM called the agent and told them 2 minutes before that they were going to draft him. And then the draft came out, they announced a different player, and the GM ended up having to call and apologize because Larry Brown last minute, he was like, "F this, man, we're taking this guy," and just completely changed what was happening. And all that crumbles down the rest of the draft, right? So, you know, now somebody else is on the board with a different team that didn't expect them to be there, and it's a mess. And I've heard this year that more teams are trying to trade their picks, and a lot of people are trying to trade down. So like Golden State, we had a workout with Denny Avdia. Steve Kerr was there, like GMs, owners, everybody are there. And they put out a report after that they loved, you know, they were blown away by this workout from Denny. And kind of, you dig through it a little bit, and all they're trying to do is get some trade bait. Like, you know, so the draft process is a mess already. And then this year it's even crazier.
Hey, this was great, man. Thanks a lot. You were excellent.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.